My daughter spent 3 weeks organizing her cousin's birthday party and I paid $2,300 for it. Then we found out she wasn't even invited because she's in a wheelchair. So we didn't go. Just sent this gift. When they opened it, half the guests left because I bought a used car on a gray Tuesday, and 4 days later I followed a GPS address that changed my life. The car was nothing special. A 2018 Honda Civic with 65,000 miles, decent condition, affordable. I wasn't looking for adventure when I bought it. I was just looking for reliable transportation to get me to a job I hated and back to an apartment where I lived alone. But the GPS had one saved address labeled home, and I was curious enough to follow it. It led me to a mountain overlook where an old man sat on a bench, waiting. "You came," he said, as if he'd been expecting me. Before we dive in, have you ever followed your curiosity somewhere unexpected? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you love stories about unexpected connections, finding purpose, and the ways strangers can change our lives, please subscribe so you don't miss our next one. Now let me take you back to the Saturday I drove to an address that wasn't mine. I was lost. Not geographically lost. I knew where I was, knew my address, could navigate from home to work and back again without thinking. But lost in the way that matters more. The way that keeps you awake at 3 a.m. wondering what you're doing with your life and why nothing feels like it means anything. I dropped out of grad school 2 years ago. I'd been pursuing a master's in English literature, because that's what you do when you get a liberal arts degree and don't know what else to do with your life. But halfway through my second year, I'd looked around at my cohort discussing deconstructionist theory and felt absolutely nothing. No passion. No interest. Just a vague sense that I was going through the motions because I didn't know what else to do. So I'd quit. And for 2 years, I'd been working at a call center for a cable company, handling customer complaints for $17 an hour, living in a studio apartment in a cheaper part of town, and feeling like life was happening to everyone else while I just existed. My college friends were getting married, buying houses, starting careers that seemed to have purpose and direction. My social media feed was full of engagement photos and promotion announcements and vacation pictures from places I'd never been. And I was just here, taking calls from angry customers, microwaving dinners for one, and trying to remember what it felt like to be excited about anything. My car had died the week before. A 2004 Corolla that had finally given up after 200,000 miles of loyal service. I'd taken the bus for a few days, then decided I needed to buy something quickly. Nothing fancy, just functional. I'd found the Honda Civic on a used car lot on the edge of town. The salesman, a tired-looking guy in his 50s who seemed as unenthusiastic about his job as I was about mine, had shown me the Carfax, pointed out that it had been well maintained, and quoted me a price I could barely afford but would somehow manage. Previous owner took good care of it, he said. Estate sale. Owner passed away. Family sold the car. Clean title. No accidents. I'd test-driven it, found it perfectly adequate, and signed the but unremarkable car that would get me from point A to point B without breaking down. On Friday evening, after another soul-crushing shift at the call center, I sat in my new car in the parking lot trying to summon the energy to drive home. I was setting up my Bluetooth connection when I noticed the GPS system had one saved address. I clicked on it, curious. The address was labeled simply home. I assumed the previous owner, or their family, had forgotten to clear the saved addresses when they'd sold the car. I was about to delete it when something made me pause. Where had the previous owner considered home? It was a small curiosity, probably meaningless, but I had nothing else to do that evening. No plans, no friends waiting, no life that would be disrupted by a small detour. So, on Saturday morning, with nothing better to do and a vague sense that following random curiosity was at least more interesting than sitting in my apartment, I decided to drive to the address. I expected it to lead to a house, maybe an apartment complex, maybe an old neighborhood the previous owner had grown up in. Instead, the GPS led me out of the city. I followed the directions as they took me onto the highway, then off onto smaller roads, then onto increasingly narrow mountain roads that wound up through pine forests and rocky outcroppings. The drive took almost 2 hours, and with each mile, I became more confused. Where was I going? This wasn't a residential area. This was wilderness, state forest land, places where people came to hike and camp, but not to live. Finally, the GPS announced, "You have arrived at your destination." I was at a scenic overlook, a small parking area carved out of the mountainside with a viewing platform and a single bench. The view was stunning. Valleys spread out below, distant mountain peaks, forests that seemed to go on forever. And sitting on the bench was an old man. He was probably in his 70s, with white hair and a weathered face. He wore a flannel jacket despite the mild temperature, and he was looking out at the view with an expression that was both peaceful and profoundly sad. I got out of my car slowly, uncertain. Had he been hiking? Was he just another person enjoying the view? But as I approached, he turned and looked at me, and then to the car behind me. He smiled. "You came," he said. His voice was rough but warm. I knew someone would eventually. I stopped a few feet from the bench, confused. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "No, but I know your car." He gestured to the Civic parked behind me. "That belonged to my son, Michael Carver. He died 8 months ago." I felt like I'd been punched. "I'm so sorry. I bought it from a dealership." "It's all right," the old man said. "That's how it was supposed to happen. I'm Thomas, by the way. Thomas Carver. And you are?" "Ben. Ben Turner." I gestured helplessly at the car, at the overlook, at the situation I didn't understand. "I don't know what's happening. The GPS had a saved address. I was curious, so I followed it." Thomas smiled, though his eyes were filled with tears. "That's what Michael hoped for. He said whoever bought the car, if they were the right kind of person, would be curious enough to follow it. And he told me that if someone came, I should be here to meet them." "Why? I don't understand." "Sit down," Thomas said, patting the bench beside him. "Let me tell you about my son." I sat, still completely bewildered, and Thomas began to speak. Michael was 32 when he died. Cancer. It started in his lungs. He never smoked a day in his life, but sometimes these things just happen. By the time they found it, it had spread. He fought for a year, but Thomas' voice broke. "He lost. I'm so sorry." "Michael was an adventure photographer," Thomas continued, as if he needed to tell the story all at once or he'd never get through it. "After his mother died when he was 12, it was just the two of us. We were close, not just father and son, but best friends." He gestured to the overlook around us. "This was our place. We came here for the first time when Michael was 14, just a random stop on a road trip. But he loved it. The view, the quiet, the way the sunset hit the mountains. We scattered his mother's ashes here. We came here when he graduated high school, and again when he graduated college. Whenever life got hard or complicated, we'd drive up here and just sit." Thomas wiped his eyes. "When Michael got sick, we both knew he was dying. The cancer was too aggressive, too advanced. In his final months, he was too weak to travel, could barely get out of bed. And I remember him crying one night, saying he wished we could take one more trip together. To our place. One more sunset at the overlook." I felt tears building in my own eyes, even though I'd never met Michael, didn't know him at all. "But he couldn't make it," Thomas said. "He was too weak. And a few weeks before he died, he told me something strange. He said he'd programmed this address into his GPS with a specific label, home. He said it was an act of faith, that whoever bought the car, if they were the kind of person who paid attention, who followed curiosity, who wondered about things, they'd see that address and maybe be curious enough to follow it." "But why? Why would he do that?" Thomas looked at me with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. "Because Michael believed that the universe brings people together for reasons, that there is no such thing as a meaningless connection. He told me, 'Dad, whoever buys this car and comes to our place, they're looking for something, even if they don't know what. Be there for them. Tell them our story. Complete the journey for me. Let someone else see our sunset.'" I sat in stunned silence, processing this. A dying man had programmed a GPS address, hoping that whoever bought his car would be curious enough to follow it and that his father would be there to meet them. "I've been coming here every Saturday since Michael died," Thomas said, waiting. "Most Saturdays no one comes. But I keep coming because I promised him. And today you came." I almost deleted the address. I thought it was just left over by mistake. "But you didn't. You followed it. Why?" "I thought about it. I don't know. Curiosity, I guess. Boredom. I didn't have anything else to do today." "That's enough," Thomas said. "That's exactly enough." Michael knew that someone who followed curiosity, even small, seemingly pointless curiosity, was the right kind of person to hear his story. We sat in silence for a while, looking out at the view. Finally, Thomas asked, "So Ben, why were you so bored that you had nothing better to do on a Saturday than follow a random GPS address?" I laughed bitterly because my life is empty. I'm 26. I work at a call center that I hate. I dropped out of grad school because I couldn't see the point, and I feel like I'm just existing instead of living. I have no direction, no purpose, no idea what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. Thomas nodded as if he'd suspected this. "You're lost." "Yeah, I guess I am." Michael was like that once in his early 20s. He graduated college with a business degree because that seemed practical. And then he'd gotten a job at an insurance company because that seemed responsible. And he was miserable. Completely, utterly miserable. What changed? He took a photography class just for fun, on a whim, because he'd always liked taking pictures on his phone. And something clicked. He realized he'd been living the life he thought he was supposed to live instead of the life he wanted to live. So he quit his job, bought a camera and backpack, and started traveling. His photographs got noticed. He built a career, and for the next 10 years, he lived more fully than most people do in 80. Thomas turned to look at me. You followed this GPS address for no logical reason. You drove 2 hours to a place you'd never been to see what home meant to a stranger. That's not the action of someone who's truly empty, Ben. That's the action of someone who's searching. Searching for what? That's the question, isn't it? Michael didn't know he was searching for photography until he found it. Maybe you won't know what you're searching for until you find it either, but the fact that you're still curious, still willing to follow small impulses, that's important. That's the difference between existing and living. We talked for hours. Thomas told me more stories about Michael, about his adventures, his philosophy, his belief that life was meant to be explored rather than simply survived. I told Thomas about my own life, my fears, my sense of wasting time while everyone else seemed to have figured things out. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in oranges and pinks, Thomas said, Michael loved this time of day. The light. The way everything glows. We sat in silence, watching the sunset together. A 26-year-old lost kid and a 73-year-old grieving father brought together by a dead man's faith that curiosity creates connections. As the last light faded, Thomas pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. Michael left this with me. He said to give it to whoever followed the GPS. He wrote it in his final weeks when he was too weak to do much else. With shaking hands, I took the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten in slightly shaky script, to whoever is reading this. You bought my car and you were curious enough to follow a GPS address to nowhere. That tells me something about you. You're searching. Maybe you don't know what for, but you're looking. I'm dying as I write this. I'm 32 years old and I have maybe a month left. And the biggest thing I've learned in this final year is that life isn't about having it all figured out. It's not about perfect plans or knowing exactly where you're going. It's about curiosity. About following the thing that interests you, even when it doesn't make sense. About saying yes to small impulses. You drove 2 hours to a mountain overlook for no logical reason. You followed curiosity instead of deleting an address. That's beautiful. That's what living actually is. My dad is probably with you right now. He's grieving. Losing your child is unnatural and devastating, even when that child is an adult, but he's also one of the wisest, kindest people I know. Talk to him. Let him tell you about our adventures. Let him share what he's learned. And then, take your own adventures. They don't have to be big. They don't have to make sense to anyone else. They just have to make you curious, make you feel alive, make you want to see what happens next. I spent 10 years as a photographer, traveling the world, and it was incredible. But you know what my favorite memories are? Sitting on that bench with my dad, watching the sunset, talking about nothing and everything. The quiet moments, the connections. You're connected to me now, stranger. You're completing the journey I couldn't make. You're sitting in the place I loved most, with the person I loved most, watching the sunset I wished I could see one more time. Thank you for that. Thank you for being curious. Thank you for following a random GPS address when you could have deleted it. Don't wait until you're dying to realize that the point of life is simply to live it. Follow curiosity. Say yes to things. Don't worry so much about whether you're on the right path. There is no right path. There's just the path you're on and whether you're paying attention to it. Take care of yourself. And take care of my dad. He needs people around him who understand that life is short and connections matter. Thank you for completing this journey for me. Michael Carver. I was crying by the time I finished reading. Thomas was crying too. We sat together on that bench in the fading light, two strangers connected by a dead man's letter. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt something other than emptiness. I felt seen. I felt like maybe my curiosity, the same impulse that had led me to follow a random GPS address, wasn't stupidity or aimlessness. Maybe it was exactly what Michael said, a way of living instead of just existing. Will you come back? Asked Thomas as we walked back to our cars in the darkness. Yes, I said immediately. If that's okay. More than okay. I've been coming here every Saturday, sitting alone with my grief. Having someone to share it with, that would mean a lot. So I came back the next Saturday, and the Saturday after that, and the one after that. Thomas and I developed an unlikely friendship. He'd tell me stories about Michael's adventures, about the photographs he'd taken, about the philosophy of life he'd developed through travel and experience. I'd tell Thomas about my week, about small moments of curiosity or interest, about things I was thinking about trying. I've been thinking about taking a photography class, he told me one Saturday, 2 months after our first meeting. I don't know if I'm any good at it, but I'm curious. Thomas smiled. The first really genuine smile I'd seen from him. Then do it. Don't worry about being good. Just follow the curiosity. So I took a photography class. Community college. Beginner level. Nothing impressive. But I loved it. The technical challenges. The way you had to really look at things to photograph them well. The satisfaction of capturing a moment. I wasn't as talented as Michael had been. That was clear from the start, but I was interested. And interest felt like enough. 4 months after our first meeting, I quit my job at the call center. It was terrifying and probably financially irresponsible, but I couldn't keep doing work that made me feel dead inside. I got a job at a local bookstore. Less pay, but more tolerable, surrounded by books and people who love them. The bookstore is where I met Gabby. She came in one afternoon looking for a specific photography book. I'd just finished reading it for my class and was restocking shelves nearby. "That's an incredible book," I said without thinking. "If you're interested in landscape photography, his zone system will change how you see light." She looked at me with surprise and smiled. "You're a photographer? Student photographer?" "Very much a beginner, but obsessed." We talked for 20 minutes about photography, about books, about how she was a graphic designer trying to understand traditional photography to improve her digital work. Before she left, she asked if I knew any good places around here to practice landscape photography. "Actually," I said, thinking of the Overlook, "I know the perfect place." I didn't invite her then. That felt too forward. But she kept coming back to the bookstore, always on Thursdays after work, always finding excuses to talk to me. And eventually I worked up the courage to ask if she'd like to see the Overlook sometime. "Not on a Saturday," I explained. "Saturdays are reserved for someone special. But maybe a Sunday?" She said yes. Our first visit to the Overlook together was 3 months after we met. I told her about Michael, about Thomas, about the GPS address that had brought me there. She listened with tears in her eyes, understanding immediately why this place was sacred. "Thank you for sharing this with me," she'd said, "for trusting me with this story." We started dating slowly, carefully, both of us cautious about commitment, for different reasons, but there was something right about it, something that felt like another example of following curiosity leading somewhere unexpected. 4 months after our first meeting, Thomas came to my first student exhibition, where I'd displayed a series of photographs I'd taken at the Overlook, different times of day, different seasons, always from that bench where Thomas and I sat every Saturday. "These are beautiful," Thomas said, standing in front of the photos with tears in his eyes. "Michael would love these. You captured our place perfectly. I learned from the best, from both of you. Michael taught me through his letter to follow curiosity. You taught me through your stories to value connections and moments over achievements." A year after that first Saturday, Thomas and I sat on our bench watching another sunset. He was quieter than usual, and I could tell something was on his mind. "I want to tell you something," he said finally. "When Michael died, I didn't know how to keep living. The grief was so heavy that getting out of bed felt impossible. Coming here every Saturday, waiting for whoever would follow that GPS, it gave me a reason to keep going, a purpose." He turned to look at me, "And then you came. And these past 12 months, watching you find your way, sharing our stories, having someone to sit with while I grieve. Ben, you gave me a reason to keep living. You completed Michael's journey, yes, but you also saved me. You saved me too," I said honestly. I was drowning in emptiness and purposelessness. Michael's letter, your friendship, this place, it all reminded me that life doesn't have to be about having everything figured out. It can just be about being curious and showing up. We sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in the colors Michael had loved so much. 2 years after I bought that car, my life looks completely different. I'm still taking photography classes, now in my 2nd year of the program. I'm still working at the bookstore, though I've been promoted to assistant manager. I'm still visiting Thomas every Saturday, though now Gabby often comes with me, the 3 of us watching sunsets together while Thomas tells stories and Gabby and I hold hands. Last month, Thomas met Gabby's parents. "She's good for you," he told me afterward. "Michael would approve. She makes you braver." He was right. Gabby pushes me to take risks, to submit my photographs to competitions, to believe I might actually be good at this thing. Last week, one of my photographs, a sunset from the Overlook, Thomas sitting on the bench in silhouette, won 3rd place in a regional competition. "You're living," Thomas said when I told him, his eyes bright with pride that felt fatherly. That's all Michael wanted, for someone to take his letter seriously and actually live. I still don't have everything figured out. I still don't know if photography will become a career or just a passionate hobby. I don't know if Gabby and I will get married. I don't know what my life will look like in 5 years, but I've learned that maybe that's okay. Maybe the point isn't having a perfect plan. Maybe the point is just following curiosity, showing up, being open to unexpected connections, whether that's a grieving father on a mountain bench or a graphic designer looking for a photography book. I bought a used car with a saved GPS address and it led me to everything that matters now. A place that feels like home. A mentor who became family. A girlfriend who makes me want to be braver. And a life that finally feels like mine. Because Michael Carver was right. You don't find purpose by planning it. You find it by following curiosity and seeing where it leads. Sometimes it leads to a mountain overlook. Sometimes it leads to a bookstore conversation. Sometimes it leads to love, to friendship, to a life you never imagined but can't imagine living without. Have you ever followed your curiosity somewhere unexpected and found something meaningful? Share your story in the comments below.